So speaking of hacks of big government, you are homeschooled, and you've spent a lot of time talking about ways that parents and communities get around the failures of government education. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's interesting because every state has different laws regarding homeschooling. So it's harder to homeschool in, say, California than it is in a place like New Hampshire. I grew up in New Hampshire, and I found there are just so many ways for parents to get around the entire idea of mandatory compulsory public school education. I mean, some people send their kids to private school. They don't feel like they have the ability to homeschool their kids themselves. My parents did unschooling before unschooling was a thing. Like, now there's a whole movement called unschooling, and it's like we're gonna let our kids lead their own education, and the parents kind of gently guide it.
We have an unschooler on staff, and he seems to have turned out okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're okay. And so prior to the movement,
these guys aren't sure that this is true.
prior to the movement of unschooling, my parents started homeschooling in the 70s when my brothers were kids, and then as it went on, it was interesting because sometimes it meant that we signed up at a local private school to take classes. It meant there would be times when my mother had to work, and she would literally just drop me off with a friend of hers for like a week, a retired friend who'd be like, "Hey, this week we're gonna build a deck, and we're gonna do all these really fun things." And so it was like it was me directed in terms of these were things I was interested in. I was like, yeah, I want to build a deck so I can learn how to build a tree house. Like all these different ways of learning how to do things. I've never had a formal class on I guess it would be what geometry is, like spatially, like understanding mathematically how things go together. But you build a deck and you figure it out. And so it was really fun, like being able to be educated in that way, and I think that so many parents can do things like that. And that was the thing. My parents got divorced. My mother was working. My father was working. I had two older brothers. It was a community. I mean, when people say it takes a village, I really hate when it implies that is government and that is your city or whatever. But you should have a community of people that can all help you with your kids. And I think it's great for kids to have lots of adults to learn from, to have peers of different ages to learn from. I think one of the most dangerous things that we've done, not just, okay, cool, we send our kids to public school and then we have to ask for permission to take them out to bring them, on a vacation or anything else. But I think one of the things I find that really stunts our growth is when we put a bunch of kids that are all the same age in a space to all learn the same thing. They all have different learning levels. And then on top of that, they don't, they're all competing because there's this, they're all the same age. They're all trying to distinguish themselves or not distinguish themselves. And there's all these social problems that occur because of that. Whereas if you have kids that are of different ages and it's kind of staggered, you have the older kids try to teach the younger kids look up to the older kids. It puts everyone on kind of a better, they all start to be the better version of themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that really I'd like to see more non-traditional schooling options. I've got friends who are working on creating a program of private Montessori schools around the country. And I think between unschooling, homeschooling, and things like Montessori, which are teaching non-traditional methods of educating people, I think there's just such a good way to teach people to think differently and not put them in government schools.